Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the afternoon session where you're supposed to doze off, having had a big lunch. So I'll try and keep you from that, being as brief as possible. I stand here as an outsider, as a journalist, you might say. I write for De Groene, which is a lovely magazine. It gives you 1,500 words to write about Fra Bartolomeo or something like that. On the other hand, they pay very badly and nobody reads it, but it's a great place to work for. And I stand here, therefore, as a victim of your efforts. I have to go to your shows, and this is often a great joy, and sometimes it's a great torment. There's two ways of writing about them, as you know. One way is to just sit back and take everything at face value, assuming that you, the curator, have done everything exactly the way you wanted, and you have all the works that you wanted to show, and I'm just mere recipient of that. The other approach is that you involve yourself in the process and ask yourself, what was the curator intending to do, and did he get the proper stuff for what he wanted to show? And both of these approaches are wrong, because on the one hand, you'll be too far away from the process to gauge what was actually going on, and on the other hand, you become too friendly with everybody, and that may impede your judgment. But as, I'm not very old, but I have seen changes in the way you or present your work and present your stuff. And some of these changes I'd like to just point out a little bit. And I'd like to start with Queen Beatrix. December 2001, the Stedelijk Museum Amsterdam, Museum of Contemporary Art. I'm using the Stedelijk specifically as an example because there's a very small chance of offending any of the curators here, but the practice is about the same. Under the guidance of Rudy Fuchs, had a show which was curated by Her Majesty the Queen. That was the third of a project. He had used two writers before that, but it was a major turn in the museum's history. This was sort of celebrity curating. The Stedelijk Museum had always been pristinely white and had always been the great place for the modernist approach to watching, seeing art in a white background with no bourgeois context and no colors and everything as it was intended. The works of art independent, self-contained, and pure. And now Fuchs, who was once noted for making an exhibition without any information on the walls, just showing the works as they were in Eindhoven, now apparently had surrendered to the pressures of, image politics, of getting people into the museum, and he aimed high and got the Queen to arrange things in his museum. And oddly enough, they also chose to paint the walls in a distinct color and renamed some of the rooms into sort of palace rooms. There was a drawing room and a reception room. So she literally took over the place. Now, as I said, the Stedelijk Museum had always been the prime example of a modernist approach with white walls, and this was always attributed to Willem Sandberg, his legendary director. But Sandberg took his cue from his previous boss, Frederik Schmidt-Degener, director of the Rijksmuseum, who painted the walls of the Rijksmuseum white in 1924. And as we've heard before, the original approach as championed by Bode and Valentiner of arranging rooms in a pretty way with all sorts of different objects and different styles together was done away with by Schmidt-Degener. The Rijksmuseum until that time had been not really a museum, but rather more of a depository for anything that was deemed relevant for Dutch cultural history, literally. There were no storage facilities. Everything that was collected anywhere was brought into the museum and put on show. It was put on the walls. So after a while, it was impossible to see anything. It was just the main gallery with the night watch that was sort of a place where you could actually appreciate the work of art. And Schmidt-Degener changed all that around, removed 90% of what was on show to new storage facilities, painted the walls white, and actually made it impossible for visitors to come in and go straight to the night watch. You had to go through the entire length of the corridors throughout the entire history of Netherlandish art before you could arrive at the main masterpiece. And Schmidt-Degener apparently really didn't like the idea of the museum being available to everybody. As I noticed in my introduction, he also did away with visits by school children. He said, there's really no point in tormenting children with things which are way above their little hats. So the museum, as he said, was a place, as it was called, for high reverence. One of Het Vaderland, one of the newspapers, said this is what a museum should be like. Hoge wijding. And so for Schmid-Degener, the proper visitors to your museum should be well educated and well behaved, and also perhaps experience the whole thing on a sort of spiritual level, right? They should be open to the higher messages of the works of art, which is not for lower people. So it's a strange counter to what was going on in society in general. For instance, in design and architecture, people like Berlage championed the making beauty accessible to everybody. If you're going to build a building, it has to be strong and it has to be useful, but you should also make it beautiful on the outside so that people who don't have beauty in their daily lives can experience some sort of quality in their lives. But Schmid-Degener, of course, was of the opposite position. Now, so with that, you might say, comes the birth of the white cube. This whole practice was taken over. It's always just attributed to the Museum of Modern Art in New York in the 1930s, where this practice of showing things on a white wall became de rigueur. Now, since then, you might say you've seen a slow creep back of color and the sort of the Bode-like arrangements. I remember the 1991 Rembrandt exhibit at the Rijksmuseum, where for the first time the walls were again painted in sort of these kinds of colors, reddish and grayish, etc. And I remember people commenting on that it shouldn't be a circus and it shouldn't be too much decor. But this is now, of course, common practice. I jump about it very quickly, but if some of you have seen the Hercules Segers show at the Rijksmuseum or the Kwap-style show, these are exhibitions where the individual objects are made subject to a grand overall design, and they're fully integrated into the spectacle. So on the one hand, you have a tradition of democratization, and on the other hand, you have this, what I would call, high reverence for the works of art. And it seems to me, listening to the speeches of this morning, that we've sort of come full circle. And the worst example, perhaps, is the Stedelijk Museum itself, which now put its main collection in the basement in a very dense and very, very, well, overly full display, which is more like what would have been common in the 19th century, with the same idea that you have different works of art very close together so you can compare styles and things like that. It is actually a little worse than that. This is a bigger threat that was also hinted at the questions about the lecture about the Stedel, that the actual objects are no longer important. You don't actually have to go to the museum to see them. What you see at the Stedelijk downstairs is the result of a Google image search. This is the way these works are presented. And for those of you who don't know, this was all thought up by Rem Koolhaas, who likes this kind of thing. So now, this could indicate that you as curators are becoming increasingly irrelevant, because the Google image search will direct people to the pictures that they want to go and see, if they want to go and see them. And what you have to do is merely open the door, I think, or indicate where these things are hung. And the people I've been talking to recently do feel a bit dejected, perhaps, about these new developments. So you may become irrelevant, as I said. But when I first discussed this with the person who invited me, who should go anonymous, but when he talked about his practice at the Boijmans, he complained a bit. He said, he complained of all these different influences that were working on him, the objectives, the targets, and of course the mad designers who have their ideas on how to design the rooms. I remember saying to him, you should shut up because you've never had it so good as a curator. Because consider making an exhibition about Fra Bartolomeo drawings or Rubens sketches. These used to be appreciated by just a handful of people, maybe hundreds, maybe a few thousand, who would come this. And now tens of thousands of interested people come and see this. And of course there are people who wear the wrong kind of shorts and come in on flip-flops and have no idea what they're actually looking at. But among them is a huge mass of people who actually read the book and actually read all the material and actually come home enriched, like, well, the thing that you'd like them to do. Everything that you know about this is now at their fingertips. There's no big book that is hidden away in the library, and if they're very serious, they can go spend an afternoon and read that. No, they can look it up straight away. So you've never had it so good, I said to him. And besides, you have all these fantastic tools at your disposal. You don't have to just put a text on the wall, but you can just put it on their phones, and you can put it in their audio tours on different levels, read by different people that they like, or people that they want to listen to. And you can go even further. Yesterday at the Alte Nationalgalerie, I saw virtual reality display on Caspar David Friedrich. This is the most beautiful thing you've ever seen, better than Caspar David Friedrich could ever have imagined it. So if you ask, as you do in the introduction text to your show, if your greater funds of knowledge and your increased sophistication about historical art have widened your understanding or narrowed it, it seems to me that it's widened beyond compare. 50 years ago, a Rembrandt exhibition in the Netherlands would have been just one blockbuster at the Rijksmuseum. This year we have 5 original, interesting new shows, each with a new focus and a new body of work and a new body of our knowledge underscoring it. But still, I hear you feel trapped. You feel trapped because your pursuit of quality and your pursuit of truth is relegated to the 2nd or the 3rd or the 4th place in the whole project, behind the publicity machine and behind the commercial targets and behind the mad plans of the hip designers who want to paint the walls bright pink. Now, let me encourage you this. Perhaps you could see this, as I, an observer coming in, see it, as a power exchange. And you do have power. All the other involved parties have power. They have huge assets. The institutions are your bosses, and they control your money and your budget, and they control your job. They could throw you out. The crowds of visitors also have power because they can choose not to show up, and that'll hurt. But then there's your power. The curator's power. And this may go back, I suspect, to the sublime expert, the grand personas of Bode or Hofstede de Groot, or those people who could basically organize the history of art the way they saw fit. But your main asset is knowledge and expertise, without which nothing would happen in the first place. They move not without your knowledge, I think so. You are the first to point at something, the first to point at something of interest, and therefore something that has to be seen, and to be seen in a certain way. So the publicity department and your managers and your quirky exhibition designers and the guy holding the money, these are not your enemies, these are your tools. You should use them and don't fight them. In my experience as a humble visitor, in both my approaches to exhibitions, there's 2 things I would like to recommend you do for my sake. If like, 1, you should fight with all your might to protect the power of the individual object. The essence of a museum visit to me is the visual experience, and it's your job to ensure that the objects can be seen properly. If a pink wall helps this experience, fine. If it doesn't, fire the guy. Secondly, you should fight with all your might to protect the individual artist, especially you as you're dealing in the artists that are long gone. You deal with art from the past. But I believe, like one wise artist once told me, there is no such thing as old art. Every artist is alive in the way he or she approached his or her skills, her problems, her challenges, commissions, tools, etc. So I consider it your sacred duty to assist the poor dead artist in communicating what he or she intended to communicate. She or he may be dead, but you are his or her only hope. So you need to wield your power with all your might. Whatever your opinions or sentiments about the proper way of showing objects, whatever your relationship to your bosses and to the public, your first responsibility is towards the poor dead artist. You are the only one who can keep his work alive. Thank you.